All right, well, without further ado then, we are rounding up to about 6:10, so let's get started. Thank you all for joining us. We are joined here by a number of folks representing the Neighborhoods Now program and the Small Business Center, Brooklyn Business Center, excuse me, from Bedford Stuyvesant Restoration Corps. And as I said prior to this, this is the Small Business Workshop, really aimed to small business owners in Bed-Stuy, but also really all over New York City, as a workshop that starts to talk about how to protect customers, how to update interiors for COVID safety, how to get permits for New York City Open Restaurants program or the New York City Open Storefront program, even how to swap some sidewalk rights with your neighbor, and to build outdoor barriers and maintain ventilation inside storefronts and also within outdoor setups. And so we'd like to get started. This program is also hosted by the Neighborhoods Now program. Since the summer, the Bedford Stuyvesant Restoration Corps has been working with the Urban Design Forum and the Van Allen Institute through this program called Neighborhoods Now, which connects New York City neighborhoods that have been hard hit by the COVID-19 pandemic with coalitions of architects like myself, engineers, lawyers, and planners. And the results have been really phenomenal all around the city, right here in Bed-Stuy, but also quite a lot of activity all around the city. I'm happy to share that the results have included design recommendations and prototypes that are geared towards empowering communities to respond to not only their immediate needs, but even contributing to a citywide strategy for pandemic response. So without further ado, I'd like to share a little presentation. Just to introduce myself, my name is Farzana Gandhi. I represent Farzana Gandhi Design Studio. As I said, I'm an architect working predominantly on socially conscious and environmentally based solutions, both small scale and large scale, really aimed at empowering communities to develop social and environmental resilience. So it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm happy to be chatting with all of you, both in this webinar, but also out there on Facebook Live. So thank you for the opportunity. So today we're going to learn some safety practices for COVID, indoor and outdoor, and just how to make this happen, right? Just as an introduction, the Neighborhood Now program was quite widespread, but here today we represent a team of about 5 different firms: Cohn Pedersen Fox, KPF, James Corner Field Operations, Farzana Gandhi Design Studio, AE Superlab, and JB&B Engineers. Just a little bit about our work thus far. I mentioned we've been working with the Bed-Stuy Restoration Corps since the summer. And as you may all know, the Restoration Corps owns this little block that is in a solid line in red in the middle of the Bed-Stuy community. The dashed line represents the Bed-Stuy Gateway bid, the extent of it, but we see our work really expanding beyond that boundary, right? It doesn't matter where your small business is located. It's really an opportunity for us to share our expertise and hope that it enables you to implement some COVID safety practices and get your business back up and running. So just a little bit about what we've done so far. We started by really engaging with the community. We held a series of Zoom presentations and workshops with invited guests from all over the neighborhood, representing a wide spectrum of institutions and businesses. So we had leaders in the community join us from small business, arts and culture, educators in the DOE, health and fitness, legal, affordable housing solutions, social services, religious services, mutual aid groups, community boards, city agencies, and of course, the restoration and the gateway bid. In doing all of this outreach, what we heard was that you all needed some help figuring out and navigating what the city had put in place for COVID compliance. Right? So we understood what the challenges were. This was back in the summer. We understood that there was inconsistent signage, some long queues on sidewalks, and then a lot of underlying problems in several neighborhoods, including Bed-Stuy, that had only been exacerbated, right? So we all know that our underserved communities are often hurting due to the lack of trash collection practices or littering on the street, potential problems with deliveries and double parking, a lack of shade and landscape, a lack of access to services and food and technology, a littering of vacant lots and vacant storefronts that really create inactive sidewalks and missed opportunities, and a lack of safe spaces for events and play. And with all of that and much more, we started our work. We started to figure out, well, what are the opportunities here? And those opportunities spoke directly to key needs. Key needs including consistent signage, DIY possibilities that were low cost, pop-up programming, greening the neighborhood, areas for safe gathering, and building neighborhood capacity. And so rather than come in with a priori ideas, we actually built with the community. We figured out what the opportunities were for furnishing, for arts and culture, how to reclaim our sidewalk space, and how to provide safe social distancing. We presented these opportunities for feedback, not only through Zoom workshops, but also through social media. Here we're seeing lots of folks chime in with questions and comments, which were always welcome and are certainly welcome here. So with this webinar as well, we encourage you all to post all of your questions and comments, and we hope to get back to you live on this webinar and or after the fact. So we look forward to hearing from you. With our social media outreach, we distributed invitation links to 21,000 community residents. Over 820 people tuned in live in our several events. Over 60 engaged us directly. And our key takeaways from all of this were the need for clear communications, addressing pre-COVID challenges, and developing safe communal spaces. So what have we accomplished so far? Well, with our friends at Partner and Partners, which is a graphic design firm, we came up with some consistent signage that you may see around the neighborhood to actually offer guidance about putting masks up, for creating social distances that were 6 feet apart, and to have and enable businesses to put in signage that was consistent and had a consistent and clear message. We developed a series of pamphlets, 3 in fact, one that was geared towards office workers and clients, another that was geared towards small business owners, and the content of this one we will be sharing quite a bit today. And then a third that was called Be a Good Neighbor. And all 3 of these are available on the Bed-Stuy Restoration Corps website for free download and free content. I encourage you all to download a guide soon. What else? Well, we found that, wayfinding and environmental graphics was really needed, right? Where should I go? How should I go? And how do I safely distance? And that was done through installing planters, potentially that could have, planter containers of different colors, as well as graphic wayfinding on the floor. We started to implement this on the restoration site. So here we see in the plaza, folks from our team, as well as folks from the community, as well as the staff at Restoration, helping out in the fall, putting down some social distancing squares with paint and primer. We got some donations from Blondie's Treehouse for greening the plaza. We imagine that this is something that can be extended to the neighborhood in the spring. And we are here today to then also offer the small business community some tips about how to implement better protection for their customers and how to update interiors for COVID safety. We have a number of other agenda items. In essence, this will be a 4-part program with other agenda items, including how to receive permits, how to build barriers, and how to work with neighbors for vacant lots. But to start, let's talk about how to protect customers and how to update interiors for COVID safety. So how do I reopen? Well, hopefully you've all been back in business for a while, and you all are well versed in all of these practices. But just to reiterate, communication and signage is key. You can download the signage that I spoke about earlier, also on the Bed-Stuy Restoration Corp, linked to the Van Allen page and the Urban Design Forum page. These posters are free. You can just print them out, either color or black and white, and you can use them in your storefront windows. Hygiene and cleaning, a regular cleaning and disinfection, at least after every shift or more frequently as needed, is key, as well as physical barriers that can protect at point of sale. So when workers and staff are engaging with customers, a physical barrier can prevent COVID spread. Social distancing, we all know about. The CDC has set up 6-foot guidelines between customers, staff, and the public. PPE dispensing and vending is something we encourage all small businesses to implement. It could be as simple as putting a quick hand sanitizer bottle at your point of sale location, or even dispensing some face masks to the public at large. Flexible work sites and staggered schedules are another way to decrease the number of people that are within your establishment. You can stagger your staff so that only a limited number are on site at any given time. Signage extends out onto the street with decals on the floor. If there's any queuing or waiting that has to happen, let's say in a hair salon or a nail salon, or even in an overcrowded bodega, you can have a series of squares or circles on the street at 6-foot distances that can safely have your customers queue up. If you have operable windows, those windows should be open periodically to increase cross ventilation through the space. And if you so desired, you could also implement contactless payment. This, of course, decreases the physical interaction between your staff and your customer. So let's talk about a beauty supply store or a bodega. We all know that in Bed-Stuy and in many neighborhoods all throughout the New York area, we have stores that are often a little bit, small, right? And so when the areas within the store are small in terms of navigation, this can create sort of COVID hotspots. And so what we encourage is a one-way flow of circulation. This can easily be established by putting some tape on the floor with arrows and 6-foot distance circles or squares, so that you have people walk through your store in a one-way circulation fashion. Right? So this essentially prevents people from bumping into each other and is an easy way to create a safety situation in your store. Of course, PPE dispensing and hand sanitizing, as I said before, is encouraged both within the store or at different areas of the store. but also at the cash register. Outdoor queuing and visible signage is encouraged out on the street. In a hair and nail salon, things get a little bit more dicey. We have to implement physical barriers between setups where we offer services to our clients. These transparent barriers can be plexiglass of different kinds that I'll get into in just a bit. But we want to make sure that these partitions are at least 8 feet apart. And if the 8 feet is not available, to essentially close off one of your stations and say, well, every other station is in use. The same goes for a pedicure station or a manicure station. These are encouraged at 12 feet on center. And if you would like, you could set up additional hair cutting setups in your backyard or in your back lot. This is something that our small business owners came up with, and we think that in our feedback sessions back in the summer, and we think it's an excellent idea. For circulation in a setup like this, it's sometimes too tight to have a circular flow, as we suggested in the bodega. And hence you can have a circulation that is one way with a little spot for someone to come off of the line if someone else was passing you by. Of course, point of sale PPE dispensing and hand sanitizing is again encouraged, along with queuing and signage practices out on the street. Indoor dining. Now that New York City is back and running, we're happy about that, with a certain percentage of capacity allowed in indoor dining. This is something that we all need to think about. So in a typical dining establishment, we've got an area in the back that is often for loading, an area right off of it that talks about the kitchen and sort of back of house staff, and then an area, of course, that's open to the public. How can we make these things safe for our customers? Well, the most important thing is to make sure that your occupancy is controlled by removing some of your seats. If you can have 6 foot distances between your table setups, that makes or ensures for some COVID safety. You can see here in this diagram, we're looking at about 15 square foot per occupant in a prior or pre-COVID setup, and a 20 square foot per occupant setup in a COVID world, let's say. This, of course, decreases your seats. However, it ensures safety for your clients. In banquet seating or booth seating, you would probably need some plexiglass or acrylic barriers between that seating. And bar seating or high top seating is discouraged. So let's review. Some indoor COVID safety upgrades include referring to the latest capacity guidelines from the city, clearly marking out which tables, chairs, hair salon setups or stations or pedicure stations or the like are available for use and which are essentially reserved as buffer. No locations should be closer than 6 feet apart. We encourage providing sanitizer at point of sale, transparent barriers between employees and customers, implementing one-way circulation wherever possible, and encourage 6 foot floor markings at any queuing areas, both inside and out. So what kind of barriers can I buy? Well, barriers are actually quite widespread in terms of availability. These are 3 that we can look at today. Each of the barrier types are at different cost points, essentially based on their material property, their thickness, and their size. So the prices that you see on the screen are for a 4x8 panel of that type of barrier at a 1/4 inch thickness, which is a good thickness to ensure that these setups can be freestanding. The least expensive of such a barrier type is one made out of acrylic at $144 a sheet. These are dependent on using cleaners that are alcohol-based, that are not alcohol-based. A polycarbonate barrier is a little bit more expensive, but it has better resistance to common cleaners and can offer a little bit better durability in terms of time and long span of time. A PETG is the most expensive of the bunch. It, of course, offers great resistance to most common cleaners, but is really something that you might want to use if you'd like to print some graphics on your surface. That surface for a PETG panel is printable, which makes it quite unique. Any indoor setup also requires a level of indoor ventilation. How can we do this? Well, the easiest thing to do is to open your doors and your windows when the weather permits. This ensures that there's cross circulation of the natural kind and costs nothing more than keeping those doors and windows open. Another easy thing to implement is to upgrade your filters on HVAC systems and to replace these every 3 months. We recommend a filter that has a MERV rating of higher, that has a MERV rating of 13 or higher. This rating is essentially something that represents how well your filter responds to small particles. The higher the rating, the better it filters those particles, including viruses. Portable air cleaners are an easy thing to implement as well. Air is pulled into a device and cleaned air is returned back into the room. Placing an air cleaner where the air intake and discharge is not blocked with any other materials on that tabletop is recommended. On the right, bottom right image, you're also seeing a DIY air purifier. This is something we recommend at a low cost point. A low cost DIY filter, now on the right of this image, is essentially nothing more than a box fan that you can get for about $20, $25, taped to a filter. Well, what kind of filter? It's a filter that is of white felt. I would recommend not using the blue nylon filters that are at a cheaper price point. And the white felt filters often come with their own MERV rating, often 10 to 12. So you want to make sure you check out the MERV rating of that filter. That filter often comes 20 by 20 and 1 inch thick, which resembles a 20 by 20 box fan in terms of size and setup. So you can essentially tape this to your box fan or rubber band it to your box fan and you're set to go. If that's not something that you are interested in and you'd like to go with a little bit of a higher price point, there are many portable air cleaner options available. These range in size, capacity, in terms of how much square footage they can serve, and they come in at different price points, ranging from about $80 to a little over $200 a setup. At this point, if there are any questions from our panelists, from our folks joining up here on Facebook, I encourage you to ask those questions and then we can move on to the other item on our agenda.
I have a question for our panelists, and maybe I'll introduce them really quickly, and then they can introduce themselves as well. So we have Chris Khalifa online from who's the co-owner of Zula, and we have Hassan also with us on the line, who is the owner of Duzan. My question and thank you for joining us, by the way. And my question for both of you, and whoever wants to pick it up, is how much benefit have you seen from the reintroduction of indoor dining, And what kind of challenges have you found in trying to implement that in the last months or weeks?
Okay, go ahead. I think, hi, I'm Chris, founder of Zuba. Hassan, if you have any other comments, of course. I think it's first of all very location specific. Our location is in Soho in Lolita, and we haven't seen an enormous difference with the introduction to indoor dining. We're also a fast casual concept, and it's basically been a bit of the same habits of people coming into the restaurant with mostly pickup and delivery, and mostly people choosing to sit outdoors. The indoor has been has been marginal. That might be different if the structure of the restaurant is different, but for our type of business and where we're at, that's been our experience so far.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. For us, is the same thing. We haven't opened dining, indoor dining as well so far. As at 25%, it does not make any sense. For us, it's a very small restaurant. It's 700 square feet, and it's almost impossible to do the 25%. Also, many other challenges as of we're a high volume restaurant, very busy restaurant. So we know it's going to be an issue to how to seat people, who's allowed, who's not allowed. We don't take reservation. It's just going to be very hectic. As well, that it just doesn't make any sense financially. And also remember back in March 16, 2020, when everybody closed and we have to adapt to the new normal, and opening again and having customers coming inside the restaurant is exactly the same thing, because you need to adapt to the new normal, which is the original normal. And that seems to be a little bit tough as well, because we did many other things to serve the food and the social distance between the employees, that it was just makes it impossible to do it with dine-in as right now. Yep. And funny thing, yesterday I just was at Mamafuku Co for David Chang, and I was having this conversation about why they're not having the dine-in, and that's exactly the answer that they had is just because it doesn't make any sense, and they're doing gold billy, so they're doing better with takeouts and delivery for other states, rather than open it for dine-in. So financially, it just doesn't make sense.
That's really interesting. Thanks, Hassan. And I should mention also that that your restaurant, you actually very quickly pivoted and implemented a whole new takeout window. You actually altered the physical layout of your restaurant. So I mean, maybe we'll get to that a little bit later. But that was one of the things that I thought was very impressive about the way that you handled it, is that you very quickly were able to kind of completely rearrange the interior of your restaurant to serve as a kind of a takeout, more of a 100% takeout concept.
Yep. It's all about dynamic thinking, and it's very, very important with any kind of business, is to switch your mindset immediately. But we'll talk about that later. Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. And really, thank you for joining us. I think it's great for our small business community to hear firsthand some of the challenges and the opportunities that you guys as restaurant owners have faced in this difficult year. So thank you again, both of you, for joining us. I see that we have a number of attendees, and with this webinar setup, it's unfortunate that I am unable to engage with you all face to face with the ability of all of you to pipe it. So if any of you feel comfortable in the chat and you'd like to just introduce yourself in terms of the kind of business that you own, I can introduce you to the larger audience. So feel free. It'd be great to know if we've got some restaurant owners here, some retail setups here, you know, some service-oriented businesses here, or nonprofits. As the challenges are similar between these different setups, of course, but there's a shared consideration of safety protocols. So if any of you would like to pipe in, we welcome your participation, either to introduce yourself and or to ask a question. So great. So we've got Tracy McNeil in the audience. Hi, Tracy. Nice to meet you. Hope to meet you in person pretty soon. And she's an event production person or professional, I should say, for retail and fashion. So thank you for joining us. We've got Takia Jerome from Fashions by TJ, retail setup, and online fashion brand. Welcome, Takia. So we'll maybe reconvene after the second part of this presentation with additional questions. But in the meantime, if anyone would like to introduce yourself, please do. It's better we know who you represent and so we can better serve you. This is for you. And that includes our Facebook community. So if anyone would like to put in the comment who you represent and how we can help, we're here to serve you. So with that, I will introduce the second part of the presentation with Q&A sessions. Of course, if you've got questions about the first part, we can always address those later. So let's get on with the show. So this second portion really talks to how to actually get a permit from the city for an outdoor setup. So that first part really focused on interiors and interior upgrades. The second part talks to outdoor setups and permit processes and the possibility of even swapping your sidewalk rights with your neighbor. So for a restaurant or a cafe, an outdoor setup is something that we've been seeing quite a bit of all around the city. These have transformed over time, becoming something that was very open air in the summer to things that have become more and more enclosed. And so we will chat about that in part 3 and some of the concerns about those kinds of setups. But to start, there are some basic guidelines from the city that we all need to follow. So first, you want to maintain an 8-foot minimum clear path on the sidewalk. So that includes if you've got any outdoor seating right in front of your storefront, that's welcome as long as you maintain an 8-foot clearance for walking on the sidewalk. And if you're extending out onto the roadway, you can extend only 8 feet maximum from the curb. With these outdoor setups, of course, tables need to be set 6 feet apart. And with a roadside setup, there are some basic dimensional protocols for a barrier. Barrier must be 18 inches deep and between 30 and 36 inches tall. And of course, you are welcome to set up umbrellas and other types of setups to create shade, as long as you maintain some outdoor ventilation strategy. And we'll chat about that in part 3. So I wanted to share a video from, it's fairly short, and it's a DOT inspector talking from his point of view all of the different elements that a roadway seating setup should abide by. As an inspector, he's the dreaded guy that comes along and serves you with a violation. And so it's pretty important we listen to what he has to say. So.
Hi, I'm Chris, an inspector with the New York City Department of Transportation, here in Park Slope, Brooklyn, in a very hot day, in front of Fonda Restaurant to discuss the open restaurants seating setup in the roadway. Now, you can take a look at the beautiful setup they have here, and if you'd like to be a part of the open restaurants experience, what you need to know is there's a few rules we need to follow. Now, the maximum width of a roadway setup needs to be 8 feet. You can't have anything further out from the curb than 8 feet that could possibly obstruct vehicles, or like we have here, bike lane. Now, when it comes to the width of the setup, it needs to be a minimum of 18 inches, and it needs to be fully closed and a full U-shaped structure all the way around. Now, this serves as protection for the people dining in the seating area. Now, you can do like they did here and fill the area with soil and put some plants for the beautification of the site. Now, what we need is the bill to be 30 to 36 inches high and have reflectors placed at the end so the headlights of the vehicle will bounce off at nighttime for visibility and safety. Now, as far as the dimensions of where you can put this, it does need to be directly in front of your property. We don't want any dining setups to be extended into another area. A few other measurements you need to keep in account would be, if you're near a crosswalk, we need a minimum of 8-foot clearance, and if there's a hydrant somewhere around, you need to clear the hydrant by a minimum of 15 feet. As far as traffic regulations are concerned, we have no stopping. Hi, I'm Chris, an inspector with the New York City Move or Security are concerned. We have no stopping, no standing, and bus stops. You cannot have these setups during active no standing hours, not in front of a bus stop at any time, and not in front of no stopping at any time. You may use the roadway dining if a no parking sign is in front of your business, but remember, you must remove or secure your tables and chairs when not in use. Now we can discuss what's inside of the open restaurants area. First of all, some options that you might have, that you do have, is you can build a platform, which would be flush with the sidewalk and provide ADA accessibility for anyone that needs it. Here at Fonda, they don't have a platform, but what they do have is an ADA ramp. As long as you have an ADA ramp upon request, this is perfectly acceptable. A few other options that you might want to take into account, especially on a hot sunny day like today, would be a tent or an umbrella. Now remember, these things need to be weighed down only. We do not want anyone drilling into the sidewalk or into the roadway to affix these things. That's unacceptable. Another possible addition you could have is lights. You can add lights as long as they're not too blind. You don't want to affect vehicles in any negative way. Remember, this is only for the safety of the vehicles and the people here eating at the restaurant. Now, if you'd like to be a part of the Open Restaurants program, it's very easy. All you need to do is visit nyc.gov/openrestaurants to self-certify. All the information you need is there and is readily available, along with diagrams and everything that I've stated today.
Okay, great. So just to review, of course, we must always refer to the latest city guidelines for both sidewalk and street level dining or roadside dining. We must maintain a minimum of 6 feet between our tables and provide physical barrier between those tables with plexiglass barriers if needed. Provide ample natural ventilation and avoid full enclosures or capsules that we will see in part 3. And if we are including any outdoor heat setups, we want to make sure that we select an appropriate kind, gas or electric, and adhere to safety guidelines and city regulations. These are some links where you can download the latest guidelines, and we'll be sure to post all links and all videos that are included as part of this workshop in our posting on the restoration site for this video and this workshop. A little bit about gas versus electric. The three heaters that we see on the left, pyramid, dome top, and tabletop, are essentially gas systems. And the one on the right is an electric heater. Well, what's the difference? And what's better for me? Oops. Well, a gas system will be less costly to start, right? An electric will be costly to operate. Just to give you a sense, for 6 heaters, 1 per table setup, for example, you could run up your electric bill by $800 or $1,000 a month. The gas, however, requires more maintenance. Electric is less maintenance. A gas is something that you can only really have in an outdoor setup that does not have a roof or enclosure. The electric will offer you more flexible setup. For clearance, you need a lot more space around the heater in a gas setup for safety reasons. The electric needs less space. However, a gas tank must be approved in terms of its storage by the city and FDNY, and you might be subject to needing a permit or having an inspection. The electric will be something that you will need a licensed electrician to install. In terms of your wiring, you want to make sure that the wiring that you extend to the outdoors is weather safe and does not exceed your circuit capacity. How do I apply for a permit? Well, the link is here. Again, we'll include all links in the chat as well as on the Bed-Stuy Restoration's Brooklyn Business page, Brooklyn Business Center page, where we'll be posting this webinar. To apply for a permit, it's fairly simple. The actual application does not take very long. The first question is essentially asking where you'd like to have your setup, your food establishment permit number, your applicant name, your legal business name, if it's different, or your doing business as name, if it's different than your legal business name, your borough, your email, your address, as well as just a few simple questions about how long your setup is on the street and what its width is, and then the overall area, square foot area of your setup. And that's it. What we've seen since after the summer is that the city has now allowed the open restaurants framework to extend to other businesses. This is perhaps great news, but then also comes with a number of factors that small businesses need to consider. So here's a restaurant setup on the left, a retail setup, or a hair salon, or any sort of service industry setup, nails, hair, etc., or even a social service or tax setup, or anything that requires table and chairs, can be put outdoors in a similar setup as a restaurant. Same barrier types, same widths, and same distances required, clearance on the sidewalk. These setups, however, require a little bit of consideration by the small business owner. For example, we've heard quite a bit from retail owners that, well, this is great news. You know, we have a small capacity of space within our indoors, and people are often scared to come in. Well, this then requires oftentimes a second employee, one that staffs the exterior. And that sometimes comes at a greater price point than the sales that one might be enabled by, the sales that might be, or profit that might be enabled by this setup. For other businesses, this might also be the case. However, if you've got 2 service providers, one manning the indoors and one manning the exterior setup, you can start to safely offer additional setups, either on the street or, as I said, in your back lot. Well, on the street, the guidelines are the same as the restaurant in terms of the roadside. Right in front of your storefront, the maximum width and maximum height is 5 feet. And again, you want to maintain an 8-foot clear path in terms of walking on the sidewalk. This program is called the New York City Open Storefronts Program. Its application is not so different than the one for restaurants. And it is now allowed for any business engaged in retail trade, including clothing, equipment stores, retail food stores, health and personal care stores, as well as food service, repair stores, personal care services, dry cleaning and laundry services. Any business that has a ground floor storefront is allowed to engage in this program. To apply for a permit, the link is similar to the other one, and it's listed here. And the application is, again, fairly short and simple to follow. It first asks whether you are a retail operator and where you'd like to operate, and whether your business also is a food service establishment. It then asks for some simple information like your name, your address, your business email, your phone, and again is simply asking for dimensional extents of your setup. Something that our team came up with over the summer based on a lot of conversation with small business owners in Bed-Stuy was perhaps a program called a land swap program or a sidewalk rights program. You just heard the DOT inspector saying that you cannot extend your setup beyond the physical storefront length or frontage in front of your storefront. In other words, if your storefront is about 20 feet, then your roadway setup must be only 20 feet. If it extends into the area of your neighboring business, you are in trouble, according to the DOT. Well, we've chatted with the DOT. We've chatted with a lot of agencies in the city, and they're open to this idea. Sometimes it's just physically not possible for a business to have their setup in front of their storefront. For example, this cafe has a bus stop or a fire hydrant in front of their setup, and hence are prohibited from engaging in this program. Well, what if the cafe owner started to chat with the tax office owner and said, hey, could you be a good neighbor? And if you're not using the setup or the space in front of your storefront, could you extend that storefront space to me? Well, we're all neighborly here in Bed-Stuy, and I imagine those kinds of friendships and alliances can be made. This barber, needs a little bit more space. That barber wants to set up 4 or 5 stations instead of just 3. So he asks his neighbor, the bank, to extend that sidewalk space across to the length of their storefront. Or here's a dance studio that wants to make use of a church parking lot when the church is not in session. Or a cafe that might want to use a vacant lot. Those vacant lot and parking lot setups are going to be something we chat more in detail at the end of this presentation. But at the moment, I'd like to chat predominantly about this type of neighborly setup where, if I'm a cafe owner and 3 stores down, if I can use that shop owner's space, and am I welcome to, what kind of alliances can I make? Well, if you're a small business owner, then red lights are flashing at the moment, right? Where you're saying, well, what about liability? What about insurance? How can I make this happen? Well, first, you should know that the city agencies are welcome to this idea. If you have a valid agreement with your neighbor, it's not something that that would be prone to a violation. Second, we've been working with our legal team to develop a basic agreement structure that you can have with your neighbor to make such a setup happen. And we can make that available to you as well. That agreement would go over liability issues. Essentially, you're responsible for anything that happens right in front of your storefront. If it was being used by another business, that liability is of that neighbor's, in their neighbor's tent, and that liability needs to be shifted. In other words, this cafe that's using the setup in front of the tax office, if something were to happen, the tax office wants to remove liability. That's possible through some basic structures that involve insurance and liability, and with simple agreements that can be made. A lot of this is happening informally already, but we'd like to just offer this as something that our neighbors can think about. So with that, I'd like to stop sharing again and offer a little bit of time for our small businesses to chime in with any questions they may have about this portion of this workshop. So we have a question from Takia about retail businesses applying for these street permits. Yes, as I just said, through the Open Storefronts program, any retail business can extend out into the street or onto the roadside, depending on what they would like. Our Facebook audience is also welcome to ask any questions, and we'll answer those questions live. We're also, you're also welcome to put those questions in after the event, and our team will be sure to get back to you. So the question comes up, well, what if you don't own ground level space? Can you still apply? Well, that's kind of where our neighbor program comes into play. If I'm a second floor establishment and I'm not privy to this program, is there a neighbor down the street that I might partner with? And that neighbor would be kind enough to let me use their space. And those kinds of things are things that we've discussed with agency leaders and have gotten their approval for. One question I have for our audience is that, and it came up with our discussions with the DOT and other agencies, is how far you as a customer might go. Let's say you've got your favorite hair salon on, the corner of this street and that street, and that hair salon just doesn't have space in front of their establishment to offer this kind of outdoor setup. How far would you go? Would you go a block, 2 blocks, 3 blocks, if you knew that they were set up somewhere else in a vacant lot, outside another establishment? That's something that I'd like to pose out to the audience as well. So if you'd like to think about that, please answer in the chat. So we have a question from Tracy about what kind of pop-up spaces or what would those pop-up spaces look like for a retail setup or fashion setup or even culture, arts and culture. We have some images coming up later in the presentation that show you exactly that. So stay tuned. And if those images don't cut it, we're welcome to talk a little bit more. So we have another question. If you own your property, but the retail space is not ground level, can you apply? And we just, I think that question was repeated in the chat. So we just answered that. Thank you for all the questions. This is great. And I regret you all not being able to talk. That's what I hate about these webinar setups. So those are unfortunate, and I hope that we can meet in person soon. Any questions from our panelists or our guest restaurant owners? Well, I do want you all to ponder that little question I asked, which was something that came straight from the agencies, which is how far you might go if you were a customer. You had your favorite establishment on a certain intersection and was unable to use the space in front of that establishment. How far might you go? You might not be friends with the neighbors on your street, but you might be friends with 3 people 3 blocks down. We all know how that goes. So if you want to create a neighborly agreement, we'd like to understand better from both the customer side and the client side, as well as the shop owner side, how far that kind of agreement in terms of distance should be enabled. This is really because of insurance and liability issues. So something where you're partnering with your neighbor next door is a little bit of a different kind of legal agreement than an agreement with somebody that is 3 or 4 blocks down. So thank you for thinking about that question, and hopefully we'll chat about that in a bit. Well, if there are no other questions, I'll go on with the presentation. I'd like to leave a lot of space at the end for more questions. So let's get on with it. So the third portion of our presentation has to do with how to, in fact, build these outdoor barriers and what are good practices and bad practices for maintaining ventilation in these outdoor setups. What can I build? Well, we've seen really quite a diverse set of things out on the street, I have to say. New York City has never been so active, and it looks great. There are places that have planters being used as barriers. You've got barriers that look very much like the one we just saw in the DOT video. And we're seeing lots of color, lots of great ideas about shade. And it's important to talk about all of these things. Well, what does this all cost me? Well, you know, a typical low end cost of a contractor built setup can range from between $1,500 to $3,000 for a typical retail or restaurant storefront. I don't know about you, but that's a bundle of money in times like these. And so we'd like to offer some DIY solutions, do-it-yourself solutions that are available that can offer considerable cost savings. This is a little barrier that our team put together, really just made out of simple 2x4 lumber and some siding possibilities, some wrapping possibilities, right? So this little barrier type, it fulfills all of the dimensional requirements from the city and is a simple frame that can be covered with a siding panel, a polycarbonate panel, extruded metal panel, or even wrapped in fabric. You can integrate some lighting solutions into the setup, both at the level of the barrier, but also up with poles and with string lights going across, as well as planters and even integrated waste baskets within your setup. This is what it looks like, and you can go see a few out on Restoration Plaza that we all built with all of you in the fall. So this is very simple. It's a 6-step process. You build the bottom frame first. You put some casters on there. You erect 2 sides that are made out of 2x4 lumber. Once the frame is set up, you can start to apply the siding or any sort of wrapped material. And you can integrate a waste paper basket or this kind of basket, by the way, can just be filled with soil. And you can also have the variety of plants that you can start to put in your setup. This is us building out on the Restoration Plaza with some staff and some community members. All of these materials can be sourced from a simple store like Lowe's or Home Depot. You're looking at about a little over 40 feet, linear feet of 2x4s that you can cut at these variety of sizes. This costs about $35 to $40. Some siding panels that come 4x8, you can cut those down to size. That can, you know, a panel ranges about a little over 20 bucks. Some floor flanges and some hardware, along with some planters, casters, and of course, the very important reflective strips that the DOT will come down hard on you if you don't have setup on the exterior of your setup. What does this all amount to? About $200 for one of these planters, or one of these barriers, I should say. To just show you how fast and easy it is to build, here we go. So of course, this is at a higher speed than normal, but this represents about an hour and a half worth of work. Just a single person can come in and put this together. Of course, if you've got a friend or a neighbor, that's always helpful. So let's review some bad practices in terms of outdoor setups. As winter came upon us, we saw a lot of these pop up all around the city. Essentially tents, right? Outdoor tents that one can zip up and they become fully enclosed. COVID safe, right? Well, not so much. Essentially, if you don't allow for any outdoor ventilation to go through your indoor setup, or I should say outdoor setup that resembles an indoor setup, essentially it's no different than eating inside. It might even be worse than eating inside, because this represents no more than about, maybe 25 square feet. And now you're in that setup along with folks you're dining with and a waiter or waitress that's coming in and out. And it's creating a closed air environment, which means that if there is anyone that is positive for the virus within a setup like this, it can easily infect all those that are in that setup. We also see a lot of sort of glass enclosures. These look great. They're beautiful. But again, they're essentially creating the indoors outside. These are not practices that we recommend, and they become what we like to say COVID hot boxes. So the other question becomes, well, some people come here and they dine here for an hour and a half. The waitress comes in, takes the order, gives you your order, you eat, you have a good time. Lo and behold, one person was positive in there, left an infested amount of air in that COVID hotbox. What happens when the next customer comes in? Is the dining establishment doing a full cleaning of that COVID box? I don't know. Do you know? This is what has discouraged a lot of people from eating outdoors. And so this is something that we do not recommend doing. This is a little bit more high end, but essentially just a giant box, right? It's a fully enclosed space with 4 walls and a roof. Makes for good dining in the cold, brisk winter that we've been having. Keeps out the snow, gives you a good view. It's great. No, not so great. And I think you all know this, and you've all come to us with those concerns. The bedside community is pretty smart, I have to say. And, a lot of people have been avoiding these like the plague, no pun intended. This is a much better practice or setup, right? So here I've got a tent enclosure, but I'm leaving 2 sides open. They're in the same direction, so they offer cross ventilation across. And if that's not enough, there's even a fan in there, right? That's encouraging airflow where the air might be static. This is not bad either, right? So it's a little high end. It's got a roof. It's got 2 sides that are glassed off, but this whole front is open, right? And inside, I'm even creating these plexiglass barriers between my table setups for additional safety. So the name of the game is that you want to make sure that air can free flow through your space in at least 2 directions, and 3 is even better. Here's another setup that's similar, making sure that air can pass through the space. Here's a nice setup from one of our restaurant owners on our panel today. So I'm sure that Hassan can talk a little bit more about this this exterior setup than I. But this is great because we're creating a roof. We've got integrated lighting. We've got some color on the street. It catches people's eye. But you know, this enclosure is open up top, so it's letting air flow, and on the bottom, to be perfectly frank, right? So it's letting air in from the bottom, from the top, and through, making sure that our customers are safe. And finally, here's an outdoor setup that worked pretty well in the summer, and we hope that we'll see more of these this summer, with some string lights going across, some planters, and of course, full open air setup. I have to say, with all of these setups, the safest setup is where, tables are 6 feet apart and we are completely outdoors. So with that, I'll stop sharing again and open this up to some questions. And maybe we can start with Hassan telling us a little bit more about his experience getting his little outdoor setup done, if you don't mind, Hassan.
Oh, I think Ahmed knows the best about that setup. So a little bit about my experience. I had just purchased a restaurant just before the COVID-19 started back in 2019 on December. And the plan was to, the restaurant that I purchased, it was 2.5 times bigger than my restaurant. My restaurant is very small. And we were in planning of design and branding, and it was a big project. And then COVID-19 started, and then all this dream just disappeared overnight. And we closed on March 16, and we closed for 1 month. And I thought that I lost my business. And then I switched the mentality from surviving this COVID-19 to thriving through COVID-19. And I believe that that one switch that made the whole success story of surviving this and actually doing better than before COVID. So in June, when we got the when the city decided to give the permits for all outdoor restaurants to get the permits, the first thing I did is just I looked at the guidelines, and I understood that this is something good from the city, but I need to build it within the guidelines. And then I understood that the other restaurant that I have and I'm not using, I can actually now use for the outdoors, because I can use all that space to get all that space that I needed, because my original restaurant didn't have enough space. Even if I wanted to do the outdoors over there, I wouldn't probably fit one table. And then I actually made a video. I edited a video and I sent it to Ahmed to get my idea of how I wanted to design it. And Ahmed was a big help of putting the guidelines and just making it look as professional as possible. And try to go with the guidelines with the safety is the priority. Not you can see many other restaurants just putting tables and just wanted to seat people with zero safety in mind, either from cars or from COVID. But that was not my intention. Was priority is safety, and then efficiency, and then the look of how everything looks, and of course everything being in budget. So I try to shop through Amazon and like other websites for um, um, like fake grass on the floor and trying to get some reclaimed wood and things like that, just to build in a best possible and looking beautiful and encourage people to come and sit, and of course to being safe. And I believe we did great, because the inspector who used to come and inspect it, they used to ask me if they can take pictures or videos of it so they can show it to other owners of businesses. And we, back in the summer, from I would say July to the end of September, it was more like a festival outside of Dusan. Um, it was really very, very busy, but very efficient. People enjoying the outdoors and being safe. I also used the sidewalk. We have only one door at the original restaurant, and we used to take the orders from that door and have the customers come and pick it up from the same door, which is a window that we built. But then I saw how that is not efficient. Then I built a room next to the restaurant, which is the other restaurant that I purchased, and I opened the window of that room and made that station as of ordering station, and the original restaurant as the pickup and delivery guys can pick up the food from that station with signage, very simple signage, just pick up here, order here, and then another signage on the floor, wayfinding on the floor that we painted the whole sidewalk. I painted 8 foot from the sidewalk where I can have the sidewalk cafe. I painted that with green, and only the area where people can pick up and order with gray, with wayfinding words, open here, pick up here and order here. And I believe that was one of the most efficient way to control the crowds. Even though the city sent me a ticket and they send me a ticket, so they send it to the landlord, but then I challenged that ticket and I sent an email to the city, and I sent them pictures before and after, how before people are all over the place and very crowded, and then what's after, how all this wayfinding is controlling actually the crowd. And if the city wanted to control the virus, they shouldn't be telling me to delete it or take it off. So I challenged it through emails. I didn't hear back from them, so I assume that I'm all good. But it's been a great experience to see how people react to things like that, and I think people react to when people see that the owner or anybody is in charge have them as customers in mind over profits or over anything else. They appreciate it, and they act to it with support and respect. And I think that's what every restaurant owner should be doing, is having the customer and the safety of the customer the first priority, and as well the employees.
Thank you, Hassan. I think there's some such great takeaways from everything you just said. You know, everything from being proactive with the city and
Yeah.
making sure that they understand, you know, why things have been done in a certain way. And, you know, I think that they're open to that at the moment, right? But, you know, sometimes there are certain rules and certain guidelines that the city is following. So it's important to have that conversation, right? And then
Absolutely.
second, just the sort of meaningful kind of outreach that in some ways you've done, and that you've shared your work and what has happened at your restaurant with others. In times like these, you know, it really requires, as you said earlier, a creative sort of mindset
Absolutely.
and flexibility in that mindset. And, you know, the more we can learn from each other, the better. And that's really generous of you. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. Thank you.
We just have a couple more minutes left, so I'm gonna just quickly go through a few more minutes of the presentation, and then we'll open this up with any last questions. So the last piece of this is about pop-ups and vacant lots, and then applying for funding, which is a very important piece to make all this happen. So some of you asked earlier, well, you know, how can I set something up in a vacant lot? We see vacant lots like these all over, not only Bed-Stuy, but really all over the 5 boroughs in New York City. And what we hope is that this presentation is valuable as a set of, you know, resources to any and all small business owners throughout the city. We are trying to implement as a team a Be a Good Neighbor program, right? So just like we were asking neighbors to be generous enough and offer sidewalk or roadside setup space, we are also outreach or looking for vacant lot owners that might be open to an idea of offering that space up, that underutilized and unused space, to businesses that are neighboring that location. Well, what could that look like? It could be quite active. It could be a pop-up that exists just for a couple hours, and or could exist for a few days, right? So it's really just something that can be ironed out again in a legal agreement that our team is happy to offer as a template. Again, for insurance and liability problems and issues, right? You want to make sure that vacant lot is safe for occupancy before you go ahead and use that lot or approach the lot owner or property owner. And we imagine that with a simple kit of parts that our team is developing in terms of DIY furnishings, simple framed cubes and boxes, quite honestly, cheaply made, again, with Lowe's and Home Depot materials, you can actually offer a flexible setup of setups, right? So by rearranging a set of boxes for seating, for table height, and for market height, you can really create a number of different setups as long as you create a set of 6-foot distanced grid within the lot. So here we're just looking at a typical vacant lot set up that way. On the right, you're seeing a market setup, again, so that it ensures a one-way circulation through. On the bottom here, a outdoor classroom, and then even some social or food court setups, and even setups for hair salons or retail. Well, how do I get this all funded? Where can I get opportunities for funding? Well, Sydney was kindly starting us off with exactly what this slide is all about. So President Biden has recently announced changes to the PPP program to focus on the smallest of businesses. Priority will be given for businesses with fewer than 20 employees. And this kind of a loan can cover worker protection and facility modification expenditures, including personal protective equipment, any and all modifications and upgrades that comply with COVID-19 federal health and safety guidelines. Another opportunity is a COVID-19 economic injury disaster loan, EIDL program. This loan provides economic relief to small businesses and nonprofits that are currently experiencing a temporary loss of revenue. This has a little bit of stricter guidelines in terms of what that program can offer. But according to the website, it covers capital and normal operating expenses, including healthcare benefits, rent, utilities, and fixed debt payments. So with that, I'd like to open this up to questions and actually invite our Brooklyn Business Center folks, we are joined here by Sydney and BJ, whom you all may know, to also field some questions regarding financial help.
Sure.
Well, if there aren't any questions, I'd just like to say that we are working. The Brooklyn Business Center is working with a couple of financial institutions, and we are waiting with anxious breath to assist any small business owner who is looking to apply for a PPP loan. And these are very trying times. And if you made it this far, it makes sense, all the sense in the world, for you to take advantage of these programs to make sure you can make it for another few months, because it looks like, hopefully, all of you guys will get shots in your arms so I can walk around feeling free of not catching a virus. But it looks like things are coming around, and it may be 6 months or so when we can start getting back to normal. And this PPP loan program can help you make it through the 6 months, especially if it can get you to a point where you can, do some outdoor dining, configure your space, your indoor space, to comply with the rules and regulations that are out there. My understanding is that theaters are opening up 25%. I think indoor dining is now up to 50%. So if you need funds to set things up, definitely take advantage of it now through the PPP or any other loan programs. And I wanted to thank you guys for the presentation. I think it's definitely on point and very timely. I think the information you presented, Farzana, was something people need to hear, and we really appreciate all of you showing up to share that information with them.
I appreciate the opportunity. As I said from the start, this is really about all of you. We're here to assist. We happen to be blessed with certain sets of expertise. And, as architects, planners, designers, engineers, we're really here to offer as much assistance as we can to the small business community all around New York City. So if there are folks that would like to reach out to us directly, you have questions about your own business, and or you'd like to see some of the resources that we shared in this presentation, feel free to contact the Bed-Stuy Restoration Corps. We've got some fine leaders there, Rachel Joseph and Jerness Sinclair, as well as the Brooklyn Business Center that is here to serve you as well. All of the resources that we showed, the diagrams, the drawings, and the links will be available for you to download in terms of pamphlets and other materials on the restoration website, as well as the Van Allen Institute website and the Urban Design Forum website. So we thank our partners, our leaders as well, that created this program. And we hope that this little webinar can reach as many folks as possible. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
BJ?
I just want to thank everybody for participating in this. It has been extremely important because so much of what's been said about small business, the need to pivot, the need to take these items and change what your business has been to make the most out of the existing situation is what's terribly important. And I think you've shown many ways that that can be done. Hassan, it was very instructive just in terms of how you did it, what the difference is, and how you can go from being in a very difficult position to maximizing it and actually doing better from it. And we'll also just want to say, as Sydney has been saying, and as Farzana has been saying, the ability to get money, to get PPP, to get EIDL is very real. It is a huge help to businesses. We've been fortunate in that our clients to date have gotten about $3.5 million in PPP and EIDL. And we stand more than ready, as Sydney was saying, to do anything we can to help people out to do this. Because we think this is a great help to people, and we really appreciate all that everyone here has done to do this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The last thing I will say is, it's important to obviously check in on the city guidelines, and they're constantly changing, and to make sure that the guidelines that you comply with are the most current. And second, something we've heard from small business owners is that, well, I've made everything COVID safe, but I'm still losing business, right? And so part of that is educating your neighbor, educating customers, making this video available to your customers so that they know that the filters you're using and the setups you're using are actually making a safer environment for them. So part of it is just getting the word out, and educating people, so that people feel more comfortable engaging in everyday business activities. So we look forward to hearing from you, both through Facebook and other channels, and we're happy to field any questions you may have. So we look forward to that. Thank you.
Well, good evening, everyone, and thank everyone again.
Got it. Good night.